Of what does an Espinas dream? You know what? That makes a lot of sense, and in this case, I suppose dreams do come true. Not just for him, but for me and for you, because essentially yesterday's trailer, along with the demo we're now all enjoying, is every Monster Hunter fan's greatest fantasy. My word. Today, then, I want to focus on Espinas, and I want to focus on a couple main things. Number one, his existence and just the absolute shock statement that makes and the implications on the greater Monster Hunter world as a whole, because the shockwaves will ramificate. Is ramificate even a word? I don't know, but that's how exciting this is. We're making up words. Bottom line here, ladies and gentlemen, is getting a Frontier monster, the first since Hypnocatrice and Levisioth, and even then, the main team did have a hand in them, whereas this is our first example, our literal first example of a spin-off monster completely being translated, canonized, and made gloriously real in the mainline Monster Hunter series. And I really need to emphasize how much of a monumentous moment this is, because it really is a Pandora's box situation. You cannot close Pandora's box. This has happened. All of a sudden, every single monster in Frontier, in Explore, in Online, in Stories, every creation outside of the bubble of the mainline series we've been loving for years is now officially, squarely, firmly planted on the table. Espinas is the perfect choice. He is an incredibly interesting monster and flagship, starting asleep, then going a bit kinda drowsy as he first gets up, then going absolutely apocalyptic on you when he enrages. This armored, thorny, poison paralysis, fiery tank that can take on Elder Dragons, or at least specifically Kushala, maybe not Elder Dragons in general, but the point is, not only is he an absolutely magnificent choice, he perfectly, of course, fits the jungle home as the iconic monster to go along with that iconic map being remade. He also really is the perfect Frontier monster of choice, not just because he is the Frontier flagship, but because he's not too crazy, but still does a little bit of that Frontierness by inflicting you with poison paralysis and fire blight at the same time. It really is lovely, and I have to say, having played through all of Frontier recently, it feels like fate. I have gained through that experience a new deep appreciation and understanding of what Frontier is, and I still maintain that parts of it are absolutely mental and not Monster Hunter-y at all, but they are fun. Whereas Espinas is very Monster Hunty, and I just needed to sit here and convey how big of a deal this is. It's wonderful, and I very much trust the devs to, well, handle the spin-off monsters with care when it comes to choosing the right ones, bringing them forward, and it basically looks like we finally had that moment where they're like, fuck it, there's so much cool stuff out there, we can bring it to the mainline series, and it will be amazing for people. And it is. Just look at the reception, the positivity, the buzz around Espinas. Not one person I've seen is going, oh, Frontier. And that's so heartwarming. So what I want to do now then is give you guys every bit of information on Espinas, from his lore, to his ecology, to his fight, to his history, that you could want. This is a remastered, repurposed, with new me actually hunting Espinas and some changes version of my recent Espinas lore video, and I hope you very much enjoy. The flagship of all of Frontier. An armor-plated rose in dragon form, dripping with noxious poison, and with the unparalleled power of sleep! Seriously, this monster will literally try and kill you in its sleep. And that's actually really cool. Welcome then, everybody, as we talk Espinas. Quite literally the Rathalos of Frontier, and honestly, a fascinating monster. Honestly, unbelievably unique in at least how it fights, and one of about the 5 monsters from Frontier I think genuinely should be in the main actual Monster Hunter games. And in fact, Espinas? No, we're just going to go with Espinas for the rest of this. Nearly was. It was planned to be in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, the Western equivalent of Monster Hunter Portable 2nd G. It would have been in alongside Levisioth and Hypnocatrice, both also Frontier monsters put to the main game, though ultimately it was decided against and cut because Frontier players were a little bit upset that the main series was getting all of their unique monsters. So that is a damn shame. The fact that it was going to be in an actual mainline Monster Hunter game, though, probably goes a long way to explaining why Espinas is actually an incredibly well-designed monster, and I am so happy that he is no longer lost to the Frontier graveyard of time, along with so many other absolutely marvelous creations. Seriously, having played through Frontier now, I have such a different outlook on it. Don't get me wrong. Some of the monsters, a lot of the monsters, are absolutely batshit crazy insane, and calling them monsters is generous, but in terms of pure fun, entertainment, in terms of the game itself, it really is a wonderful experience, and out of all of them, Espinas, well, shines on top. So, the Lord of the Great Forest, Espinas. It's said in ancient times he battled with an elder dragon. He, a lowly flying wyvern, eventually came out on top and won. The elder dragon in question was Kushala, the dragon of wind, the steel dragon, and let's be honest, he does not go down easy. So you may be wondering how Espinas managed to best him. Well, what is Kushala's signature weakness? Poison. So that might give you a hint to what Espinas is all about, but it goes so much deeper than that, though the poison does go very deep. Espinas is armored. He is heavily armored. He is heavily armored. He is heavily, ultimately, mega ridiculously, absolutely armored. And that is where his whole shtick begins. He is so incredibly, ridiculously, completely, utterly, unbelievably armored that he spends most of his time asleep because he literally doesn't feel threatened by essentially everything, to the point where he will stay sleeping while being actively killed by other things, because those things actively killing him before getting through his armor plating will get too exhausted and or bored and give up. That's so awesome! He starts every hunt fast bloody asleep because he doesn't give a fuck. Just leave Espinas alone, alright? He doesn't care. He really doesn't care. You will bounce off nearly his entire body except for his tail and or head, and you just have to really, well, be worthy of his attention. You have to get him up. In his sleep, he will just, go away. Just meekly move around just to get rid of you. And that's quite effective because just touching an Espinas can be a death sentence. You see those bristling red thorns? Well, he very much is rose-like, beautiful from afar but deadly to the touch. Each one of them is packed with incredibly potent toxins, and thus every attack from this creature is going to fill you with them. And this means that even in his sleep, anything that approaches is more likely to damage itself than it is the Espinas. Indeed, one of the ways that it hunts is literally staying still and letting smaller creatures come over and through either aggression or curiosity kill themselves against his spikes. He wakes up when he gets hungry and just enjoys his pre-sleep killed toxic meat. Like, come on! Oh, that's so cool! Eventually, though, you will get him to wake up. You will prove worthy of him to at least see what's going on. But you might think, so the fight starts then? No, the fight doesn't really start then. He's just woken up. He's still sleepy. He's still very, very much arrogant in his defenses. He'll very slowly, very casually walk around, and the thorn one wyvern will do what it do and try and evaluate you. It will very slowly, gently try and push you away, and you have to keep pressing the attack and trying to break that absolutely iron-clad hide. He is an example of a near-perfect offense and defensive adaptation working simultaneously in harmony. He can't be hurt because of just how dense, rigid, and interlaced his suit of armor is, but also he doesn't need to bother repelling or fighting because his oozing toxic spikes will do that for him. You really have to get on his bad side to actually kill him. And thus, one of his greatest strengths also proves to be his downfall and greatest weakness. Eventually, if you keep going, if you keep being just a real irritating little bastard of a hunter, stabbing and nicking and just not giving up, he will enrage. His scales will flush red, the anger boiling in his veins, and his shell will soften as a result. And that softening now makes him very much more vulnerable. But it's not just more vulnerable, he now becomes much deadlier. Poison bubbling, spouting from his spines, from his horn. He gets a lot faster. He will charge almost like a monobloss horn down. He will unleash elemental fury. A fireball that's not just a fireball, but infused with his concoction of chemicals, leaving you not just burnt on impact, not just burnt and poisoned on impact, but burnt, poisoned, and paralyzed on impact. It is not something that you want to have an encounter with. And thus the fight continues, and eventually you will bring him down. And I just think that's such a simple concept, but executed so well, and it's so fascinating and fun. A monster so heavily armored that it literally doesn't bother to fight back unless you really are persistent. A monster that if it doesn't see you as a threat after waking up, will actually just go back to sleep in the ultimate insult to whatever is pathetically trying to injure it. I mean, that's just so cool. There's no other way about it. There really, really isn't. So while he might be green and poisonous, much like a Rathian, he is so much more. While he might look like he's just told a really unfunny joke, but is waiting for people to laugh anyway in his artwork, he is so much more. While the fight, once he's angry, might seem, and kinda is, a very simple, straightforward flying wyvern fight, getting him there is so much more of an experience. And you see now then why he managed to defeat Kushala. He is a counter to him. Not only do the Gale Force winds essentially just break against his carapace, as soon as Kushala touches him, he will be impaled even through his iron skin and injected with that poison. And it is very potent poison. It's not just your regular poison. It lasts for a long time and is incredibly agonizing, sapping life rapidly. So yeah, Kushala wants none of that. He essentially has no way of stopping it, and that's why Espinas really doesn't care, because even Elder Dragons just can't be bothered to put in the sheer amount of effort it would require to kill one of these things. And thus the great forest where he chiefly calls home became his, and it's really quite the beautiful environment. He also, I will admit, I think does look quite cool. He's not crazily over-designed, and a lot of the time I'm like, oh, spikes everywhere. But this is literally his point. He is supposed to be spikes everywhere, that's how he works. But even then, their placement, shape, and how they're actually arranged is really cool. He really is a deadly rose, and I think that's fantastic. I honestly, from fight to visuals, really do believe he is one of the best. So there is a few more versions there. There is the Espinas subspecies, which is just named that kind of anticlimactically, the brown thorn wyvern, and this guy just turns him up to 11. Can be found in more deserty areas, but also high atop the forest. He is just more intense. He is easier to wake up. He is easier to anger, and his chief change is in that ball of death that he can send firing at you, and it really becomes a ball of death, a huge explosion of poison, paralysis, and flaming doom. It's very, very potent. Apart from that, it is just Espinas turned up to 11. But if you want Espinas turned up to 12, there is the Espinas rare species. Now, rare species, remember, are Elder Dragon level, akin to Gold and Silver, Rathian, and Rathalos. And this guy is even easier to wake up. He's even easier to anger, to get to that proper fight, you could call it. And he also looks, I'll be honest. So yeah, that is Espinas and his variations. His poison is said to kill anything in under 10 minutes, which is quite intense when you think about it like that, but he really is just ridiculously crazy Espinas, and honestly, I still really like him, just because of how he looks. And I'll admit, the patches of so-called Hellfire, the poison fire that he puts everywhere, do look really cool, and I could totally see this be an actual monster in Monster Hunter. I really can, and it almost was. I really think he is probably the #1 candidate to ever be saved and brought over now that Frontier has been sadly stopped. Hell, his hammer is literally his head. Not just kind of his head, not just shaped a little bit, not just using his horn, it's his head.
Oh, want to see its head?
You're not actually exaggerating.
This might be actually the most gruesome, like, most accurate depiction of a head on a stick that I've
top of its skull.
It's literally, the hammer itself is just like a handle with a big circle of iron on the end that is a collar around what is clearly a severed head attached to the neck of the Espinas. Like this is the most
put the head on his desk. He just took a pole and just ting, and then handed you it back. His weapons, by the way, poison and fire. So that raises the question then if indeed his Sunbreak equipment will be dual status and element, which obviously raises a lot of potent possibilities and is something, well, that's quite the big deal, honestly. That's kinda ridiculous to be able to build around both an element and a status, especially for those faster weapons. So, potential? There is a Zenith 2, which are ultra mega ridiculous go crazy versions of monsters, and Zenith Espinas is actually really fun. He's got an overgrown horn, vines around him, takes everything he does and amps it up to 11, and I would be surprised if we got any Zenith moves baked into Sunbreak's Espinas, but at the same time, I mean, it would be quite the cool challenge to do so, but we'll see. That then is all you need to know about Espinas, how he works, what he's all about, and why you should be excited about his inclusion. It is ultimately awesome to get the overall Rathalos of Frontier resurrected to at least represent all that was lost with that game, and I honestly would love to know how you guys are feeling about him. Are you excited? Are you glad this has happened? Are you hype? I mean, the main thing is, obviously, the floodgates have now opened, that any spin-off monster could now essentially be canonized, and that's kinda both scary and cool at the same time, is it not? I kinda think so. I mean, ultimately, he is looking amazing. Like, absolutely amazing. And he seems like both a faithful recreation and also much improved. And obviously, it will be his best version ever because, you know, it's a lot many years later on with a lot of time to iterate and improve him. So, basically, yeah, things gonna be good, and I hope you've enjoyed this little look. Like if you actually have, subscribe and hit the bell for more so you don't miss more Sunbreak goodness. Consider supporting the future of this channel on Patreon down below, as it is what keeps us going. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world our stage. Goodbye.